Hello, I'm Poppy Miller. Welcome along to a fresh hour of CBS Sports HQ presented by Zelle. Zelle is a great way to send money to friends and family wherever they bank in the US. Look for it in your banking app today. We've got another action-packed weekend coming up in the NWSL with only 8 games to go of the regular season. The playoff race is well and truly on. Only 6 points separate second through 7th place in the standings. Let's take a look at what we've got coming up.
There is another action-packed weekend across the NWSL with the postseason picture heating up. On Saturday, the Chicago Red Stars look to take care of business at home against Kansas City after picking up a crucial point in the standings.
Making for an intriguing moment here. All line across, that's clear, but not entirely. Chicago equalizes now.
And on Sunday in the district, the Washington Spirit aim to collect another 3 points after coming up clutch in the final minutes against Orlando.
Driven by Sanchez, what a goal!
But the Spirit will have a tough task on their hands against the surging North Carolina Courage.
Played inside, and Amy Rodriguez with a goal for the North Carolina Courage.
New Jersey, New York Gotham FC take on the Orlando Pride at home, with both clubs seeking to keep pace with other contenders. In the Northwest, the OL Reign have found their groove offensively behind team leader Megan Rapinoe.
And she puts it in the right corner and gives OL Reign a 3-2 lead here in stoppage time.
And the Reign will need just that as they host the thriving Portland Thorns in the latest round of the Cascadia rivalry. And the final match of the weekend goes down in the Lone Star State as the Houston Dash go head-to-head against an improving Racing Louisville FC. Who will seize the moment in a busy weekend in the NWSL? Tune in to Paramount Plus to find out.
So the race for the postseason is well and truly on, and here to look ahead to this weekend's game, our former Olympic gold medalist Aly Wagner joins us now. Aly, good to see you. Let's kick off this weekend with Kansas City, who are heading to Chicago to take on the Red Stars. And we had some more good news for Kansas City midweek as they got their 2nd win of the season on Wednesday. How are you expecting them to fare against the Chicago side, who's winless in their last 3?
Yeah, I mean, interesting season, I think, for Chicago, because this is a team that has always been really competitive, always makes playoffs in that top 4, but really have not looked good on either side. If we're talking about goals conceded, they've conceded 22. Only Kansas City has conceded more at 25, and they're tied at 22 with Louisville. So both expansion teams are right in the same arena in terms of goal conceded, and that doesn't bode well for Chicago coming up against, I think, a Kansas City side that, as you said, Poppy, is starting to feel themselves a little bit and find form this late in the season. Obviously, it's become incredibly clear they needed a little more thrust in their offensive third. They've got that out of Haley Mace, Kristen Hamilton. Last week we talked about how are they going to start to find the back of the net. Against Louisville, they got an own goal, and then Hamilton got her first goal since coming over to the side. I think that is one of the keys for this group is Haley Mace has not been able to be the producer. She's not the one that's converting the chances. Of course, that needs to change for them to have a lot of continued success. But I think Hamilton getting on the end of the services, being the one that is getting that final touch, is going to be key for them coming up against the Chicago side. And Chicago knows they've got to do 2 things. Keep Mace and Hamilton in front of them. They've got to absorb the space. They've got to manage transition incredibly well because, as we've seen out of Kansas City, they've got that pace to break and get behind. But ultimately, they've got to start finding the back of the net themselves. Kalia Watt picked up her first goal in their tie this last week. Her other goal, but her other goal of the season did come against Kansas City on the road in their 2-0 win against them. So I do think Chicago, as much as Kansas City looks to be finding form, I think Chicago has the home field advantage. I think they're a team that is going to look to start to rectify their season, and I think they've got to get Kalia Watt going. Mallory Pugh has been incredible, but she's doing too much. She's the one being asked to bring the ball forward and produce. They've got to get their wing play going, and Kalia Watt, I think that's where they have an advantage against this Kansas City side, where they can get after this back line and put them under pressure. I've said it before. Mallory Weber is not a natural fullback. Kiki Pickett is a rookie, a young player. So these are players that they need to get at and start to drive back on their heels if they want to get the result this week and start to turn their season around.
So favoriting the Red Stars there, but Kansas City looking to build on their momentum. Another team looking to do the same is the Courage, who have been red hot as of late. They'll take on the Spirit, who sit just below them in the standings. Are you expecting more dominance from Paul Riley's side this weekend as they chase Portland for that top spot in the league?
I am. I think this North Carolina side is finding their rhythm, and they're getting players back at a time when they needed them most. But having said that, Paul Riley said Washington Spirit have been the most difficult team that we faced all season long. In fact, Washington Spirit have beat them twice. So you would look at history and say it doesn't bode well for North Carolina, but 3 wins and dominating wins at that, clean sheet, 4-0 over Kansas City in their last match out. And we talked about it, Poppy, last weekend. Was Paul Riley going to be able to get Amy Rodriguez, Jess McDonald, Lynn Williams, Dabinia all on the field at the same time? Well, he certainly did, and he found a way to get 3 of those player goals. A-Rod, Lynn Williams, and Jess McDonald all finding the back of the net. I just think it's going to be a really difficult task for Washington Spirit on this Sunday, in this Sunday matchup. And ultimately, they've got to manage the young talents that are on this Washington Spirit side. Ashley Sanchez, we saw her game-winning goal in the highlight coming into this weekend. And Trinity Rodman, Ashley Hatch, these players have done incredibly well under Richie Burke's system, and now they're transitioning into whoever their new manager is going to be, but they're incredibly comfortable with each other. They play well off of one another. And so if you look at this Washington Spirit team, as much as they want to possess the ball, I think the one area that North Carolina has to be wary of them in is in transition, and that comes from Andy Sullivan, that comes from Ashley Sanchez. The organization they have to send Rodman, to send Hatch through is incredibly vital. So Paul Riley's double sixes, the way he plays in his box midfield and his fullbacks, that balance between those players in transition is going to be key for them as they go from their offensive positioning to their defensive roles. And I think he's going to have to keep Merritt Matthias a little bit lower, roll Jess McDonald out to create that width in the attack. And Matthias will help them deal with and absorb the transition game that is incredibly potent from Spirit.
So the race continues for the top of the table, but it's so tight in the middle of the pack. Coming up Sunday, a meeting between 5th and 6th as Gotham host the Pride. This is 2 teams, Aly, that have had a dip in form lately, both equal on points. So a massive match here. Who do you favour?
You know, coming into this match, I wasn't quite sure, because you're having Gotham that's coming off of 3 losses out of 4, 2 really difficult games in the Pacific Northwest where they lost to OL Reign in a comeback victory for OL Reign. And then, of course, Portland dominated last week. But I'm going to give the go-ahead nod to Gotham and Carly Lloyd's squad. You saw her goal there that she had against Portland. And this is the last game for Freya Coombe. And they're going to want to send her out on a high note. She's going to want to put this team in the best position to win. What we saw against Portland was they were set up in a 3-5-2. It didn't bode well for the squad in the first half. They were completely dominated. When they shifted back into a 4-back system, they looked so much more comfortable. They put Portland under a ton of pressure. They had the possession, and they utilized their wing play to get at Portland and create. And ultimately, they could have found a tying goal. They could have even found a go-ahead goal. So I think they dominated that much in the second half. And I don't think Freya Coombe is going to set them up in a way to transition them to the future. I think she's going to want to get a result out of this game. And I think they match up well against this Orlando team. I do have questions about if Orlando's going to be in a 3-back, because they shifted into a 4-back in their last match against Washington that they ultimately lost. But I think that this team might go into 3-back and play in a 2-front with LaRue and Taylor. Those 2 players have been dynamic together. LaRue is going to be a player that really has to get going. She hasn't had 2 goals, or she hasn't had any goals in her last 2 games. And she's been the biggest player for them ultimately. But with this side, I can see them trying to do that 2-front, the way that Portland was able to press and put them under and run the channels. I think that they might go back to that. And that's why I actually like Gotham and their ability to utilize their wide play against a potential 3-5-2 out of Orlando.
Well, talking of form, Aly, one team that's had no problem is the league leaders, the Portland Thorns. They're unbeaten in 10 as they head to Seattle to take on the Reign. They've also got all their Olympians back now as well. They've just been so good at both ends of the park. How tough is the task for OL this weekend?
This is the game. I mean, this is the best rivalry in the NWSL, and it is a massive task, Poppy. I do think the task is almost harder for these managers. It's a good problem to have, but they have to pick their starting 11 with these Olympians coming back in, with Eugenie Lassemer coming back into OL Reign's side. Who does Harvey pick as the wingers? Huerta's been in incredible form. Now Rapinoe's back, but Lassemer's back. Do you slide someone up to that 9 spot where Balser has been? But Balser is their leading goal scorer and has scored 5 or 6 goals at home. So I do think who these managers ultimately line up and their starting 11 is going to be key, but they're both going to have cards to play on the bench. If Simone Charlie returns for Portland, that means maybe Sinclair moves to the bench. I mean, what world did we fathom that in? Because Sophia Smith, how do you take her out? She was the dominant presence in the match against Gotham. The way she pressed, she was on top of this back line and forced mistake after mistake. Having said that, I don't think OL is as committed to playing out of the back as Gotham was. And so I don't know if the pressing moments are going to be as many, but she is incredibly fast in her closing. And we saw her finally convert on the opportunities that she was creating. She was the one who ultimately drew the penalty that Sinclair stepped up and finished. So I think this is a massive test for OL Reign. They did beat Portland earlier in the season, though, in Providence Park 2-1. So I think OL likes their chances on their home field on a smaller pitch where perhaps the channels don't get as big for those front two to run into from Portland Thorns. And I go back to this wide play. If you get outside that diamond of Portland, there's opportunity to be had 1v1, 2v1, if you can rotate your outside backs high, if you have enough possession. So I think this game is going to be a fascinating matchup. I do ultimately see it being square at the end and being a tie.
Oh, Ali, going for a tie there. Great point that you bring up, though, about the last time that those two teams met. So all to play for in the Cascadia rivalry. And finally, to conclude the weekend's action, the Dash will host Racing Louisville, two teams that are out of playoff contentions as it stands, but still in with a chance if they can finish the season well. However, it makes most of their games absolutely must-wins from here on out. How do you see this one unfolding?
Yeah, and the difficult thing about that is I think they're heading in two different paths, if you will. Louisville, quite frankly, just doesn't have the depth as an expansion team. They haven't been able to rotate their squad. We saw that in their last game against Kansas City. Their legs were gone. They were making mental mistakes. They scored an own goal. Simon did on that back line. And I think it's a tough position for them to be in, that they have to go out and get results. And this is against a team in Houston Dash that is returning a ton of Olympians, the core of their squad, in fact. So you've got Schmidt coming back in, you've got Daly, you've got Prince, you've got Chapman, you've got Christy Mewis, you've got all these players returning to the fold. Those are 5 starters and 5 very key starters. And I think if this Racing Louisville wants to get a result, they have a difficult time straying away from their pressing game, but I think they've got to sit back and allow Houston Dash to come out, because they may have some luck and opportunity if they can get Ebony Salmon running it behind, CeCe Kaiser running it behind, and turn that center back partnership of Houston Dash. Otherwise, it's them looking to break down Dash and their really organized defense, and then they are going to be vulnerable in transition, because this Louisville team, again, young at the back line, but coming up against Shea Groom, Daly, Nichelle Prince, getting those players going and back into the fold, this team will want to fly. They're going to want to take risks, as you said, Poppy, to get results. And I think that it could get ugly for Louisville if they don't control the game in transition.
So just 2 points separate them in the standings. So all to play for in Houston come Sunday. Ali, it's setting up to be such a close run in this final home stretch. Brilliant insight as always. We appreciate you. Enjoy the matches. Thanks so much. And here is a look at the league table as it stands heading into this weekend's action. The Thorns will look to keep their 5-point cushion at the top as Paul Riley's North Carolina continue to chase them. Gotham FC and the Pride, they'll go head-to-head Sunday at Red Bull Arena, equal on points as it stands. We'll see how that looks come Sunday night, though. And the Dash and Racing Louisville, as we mentioned, both desperate for points as we come into the home stretch, both looking to get back into the playoff race. But the task is tall. Well, it all gets started Saturday night when the Red Stars host Kansas City at 8 p.m. Eastern.